While most of us wrestle with unknowns as if it's something to overcome or banish, many artists, writers, and musicians invite unknowns into their work. They don't wrestle with them. Instead, they dance with them. Unknowns, including chance events, are catalysts for creativity. Musical improvisation is a paradigmatic example of this, and improvisation in jazz is its prototype. We were fortunate to have jazz musician John Mackey join us in the studio to talk about the nature of improvisation, how it enables on-the-spot creativity, and the techniques he uses to help his students on the journey toward becoming capable of improvisation.
I love that challenge of trying to play something that's strong and convincing, but then make it exciting. And it's like creating a problem on the spot and then you have to fix it. Most of the time it works, but of course sometimes there's elements of surprise.
Something else that strikes me as going on there as well is that the consonant part sets up for the audience, for the listener, it sets up an expectation.
Yes.
Right? So you're listening to the scale, now you've got familiar with the notes, and you expect the music to carry on using those same notes. Then you violate that expectation, right? So all of a sudden...
It creates tension.
Yeah, it creates tension because the person's going, wait a minute, I thought we were in this key.
Yeah, I mean, from a listener's point of view, as well as a performer's point of view, that element of uncertainty creates a lot of tension and a sense of questioning. And I like the way you said it, because as I get older, I'm actually really conscious of setting. It's not always true, but mostly I like to set the tone, so to speak, and then go way out and see if I can be convincing in another key. So, everybody's over here, but I'm over here playing with the same structures that I would use in a consonant setting, but over here in a different tonality, and then see to what degree I can resolve those. So it's kind of over here, playing over here, and then come back, touch bass, and the audience goes, oh, thank goodness he did that, and then you go run away and be creative, and then of course the gap becomes smaller and smaller, so it becomes a more ambiguous way of playing where people will go, wow, that sounds really strong, but there's something really weird going on. And I find that more exciting because it's the subtle manipulation of the tonality that creates the tension, rather than going, here's consonant and this is definitely dissonant. That's not very subtle. So more and more I'm trying to bridge the gap, so to speak, in terms of percentages of outside notes versus inside notes.
So is there a big difference between when you're creating a piece of music by itself to when you're improvising, or the process is fairly similar?
Yeah, you guys have thought up some really good questions here. The way I teach improvisation, if I can start off like that, is that I say to everybody, you're composing. You are composers when you improvise. And of course, as you alluded to, there are different ways of composing. You can sit down and say, right, I'm going to write a piece, and then I can use that vehicle to put on the bandstand, and then you improvise over that. And then, of course, quite often, well, of late, especially in the last 5 years, I'll go on a gig without knowing what tunes I'm going to play. I'll talk to the audience, and then I tell them what's going on. I say, well, we're going to play a piece in F minor now for you, and it'll be a bossa nova. And the guys are going, okay. And so I go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we just play. So my job is to create a melody. It might be boo ba boo da which is the one I played before, and then I'll use that as the template melody, and then all our improvisations are based off that initial one. So that's composition on the spot versus sitting down and really crafting out a composition that you're happy to sit on for years.
So I think maybe to finish off, it would be good to go back to Anne Kirwan's matrix of knowns and unknowns, and there's a box in that matrix that talks about tacit knowledge, which is what we don't know that we know. And a lot of the time we're actually thinking about making tacit knowledge explicit, but it seems to me that in jazz you're doing the opposite. What you're trying to do is to get people to make their explicit knowledge tacit or unconscious, so that people can then draw on it in that creative situation. Do you want to just say a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, can I go back to my childhood, because it kind of hopefully answers your question. I hope it does. I grew up with the music in the household as a little kid, so from an early age I had a very good oral understanding of what the music was. So I consciously listened to it hours and hours a day. So by the time I actually got to an instrument when I was 10 years old, I was already playing those sounds, even though I didn't know what they were. I heard what they were, and then I studied them, and then I understood it at a different level, so theorised and oral together. And then you consciously practice all these shapes and ideas, put them into the subconscious in order to forget them, hopefully. Because as soon as you start thinking about something that should be intuitive, there's this sense of stumbling. It'd be like, driving a manual car down the road and trying to explain to someone all the subtle coordination of changing gears. If you actually had to think about it, you'd be bunny hopping down the road, and that's kind of what it feels like when you're improvising. As soon as you start to think, that there's an element, there's a blockage that occurs, and you can hear it. You can hear the people that have spent thousands of hours, as opposed to those that are still working on getting to that seamless point.
Right.
So yeah, I'm still working really hard on trying to get to the next level, and it's funny that the more that you know, the more you realise you don't know. So I'm finding that bridge to get to the next level, I'm trying to bridge that gap is getting more difficult, because of course you're really pushing extremes all the time.
So there'd be two bits that it'd be great to have you say a little bit more about. What's the next level for you? And can you say something about the more you know, the more you realise you don't know? How does that play out in your particular field?
When I pick up the instrument, it actually feels like an extension of my fingers. It's like a transformer, kind of morphs into your fingers. That's how I feel about it. So in order to get to the next level, I'm trying to work on my musical imagination, and I'm trying to play specifically what I hear, and if I can't do it, I'll just sit down until I can do it. So yeah, I'm still working on the extremes of things, and trying to extremes of technique, I mean. And in terms of working on that, I'm still trying to focus on the beauty of it, because I've built up this reputation of just playing millions of notes over many years, and it makes me a bit disappointed when people still think that I do that, because my playing has changed drastically, really, in a good way. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to work on using my quick technique in a more beautiful fashion. Well, I guess I'm relating it on two levels. I'm relating it to elements of my own research and what I'm trying to find out for myself, but I'm also directly relating it to a couple of my idols over many years, namely John Coltrane and Michael Brecker, probably my biggest inspiration. So I'm always trying to find out what they're doing, and trying to capture that in my own performance practice. But that will be a lifelong pursuit. That's not something that I'll ever get in a few weeks. So I'm resigned to that, which is fine. But yeah, I actually say to my students a lot, I think I've learned a lot, but I know that I've got a lot still to learn, and I'm really open to doing that. And I'll never be happy with what I do. And so I'll always be searching for the next thing to get under my fingers, and I guess that's what I mean specifically about, the more I know, the more I realise that I don't know stuff. And I guess there's another level of that is there's theoretical knowledge that I need to get in, but of course it's actually applying that new theory to your instrument that is probably the biggest challenge. For instance, notes contained within a C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, can be explored structurally in terms of 4-note chords off each note of the scale. But I stumbled across this. It was actually a mistake in my practice, is that I was practicing a certain structure and then I played an extra note. So I was actually playing pentatonic scales, 5-note scales, over each note of the scale. But I started playing those particular scales off each note of the major scale. So there was inbuilt dissonance in those, because each note became its own key centre, but within the context of a C major sound. So there's all this inbuilt dissonance and varying levels of dissonance. So that's what I'm trying to turn that into a pedagogical platform as well as a practical vehicle, I guess. So
Well, this has been great.
yeah, well, thank you for
Thank you.
having me. It's nice to
Yeah. Well, thanks for
nice to sit and talk with you again. It's been a while.